Hello, guys. Welcome to Informer. We hope you'll enjoy our today's story. The smell of coffee woke me up. I turned to where Vanessa usually slept beside me, but her side of the bed was cold and empty. I got up and followed the smell of coffee downstairs. The kitchen was quiet except for the refrigerator humming softly. Vanessa, I called out, but there was no answer. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen island, thinking about the past 25 years. Our home in Connecticut used to be filled with happiness and love, but now it felt different. I was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. It was Naomi, our 16-year-old daughter, with messy hair and sleepy eyes. "Did you sleep well?" I asked. She shrugged and poured herself some coffee. "Where's Mom?" she wondered. I sighed. "She's already gone to work, I suppose." Naomi frowned. "Again? She's been leaving early a lot lately." "Yeah, she has," I agreed, trying not to sound too concerned. Just then, Ethan and Lucas, my two sons, came in through the back door, sweat on their foreheads. "How was the run?" I asked. Lucas grinned. "Great, I beat Ethan by a lot." Ethan rolled his eyes in response. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, bro." I chuckled, watching them playfully shove each other. These moments, I treasured them. But lately, they felt incomplete. "Dad, you okay?" Naomi's voice cut through my thoughts. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about work. Speaking of which, I should get going. You kids have a good day, all right?" As I drove to my architecture firm, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my gut. Something was off with Vanessa, and I couldn't put my finger on it. The day dragged on, filled with client meetings and design reviews. By the time I got home, the sun had long set. I walked into the dining room, hoping to catch the tail end of dinner. Instead, I found Naomi clearing the table. "There's leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry." "Thanks, sweetie. Where's your mom?" Naomi's face fell slightly. "She got a call from work. Said she had to go back to the office." I felt my jaw clench. "Did she say when she'd be back?" "No, just that it might be late." I nodded, trying to keep my frustration in check. "All right, why don't you finish up here? I'll take care of the dishes." As I scrubbed the plates, my mind raced. This wasn't like Vanessa. She'd always put family first, no matter how demanding her job got. What was different? The front door opening interrupted my thoughts. Vanessa came in, looking tired but strangely full of energy. "Hey," I said, drying my hands on a towel. "Long day at work?" she nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, sorry about dinner. Work was really busy today." "Seems like that's been happening a lot lately," I remarked, trying to sound neutral. Vanessa tensed at my comment. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just an observation. You've been working late a lot." "Everything okay?" She brushed past me, heading for the stairs. "Everything's fine, Carlos. I'm just busy. You know how it is." But I didn't know. Not anymore. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. Family dinners became a rarity, with Vanessa's chair often empty. When she was home, she was glued to her phone, smiling at texts from someone I couldn't see. One night, as we got ready for bed, I decided to broach the subject. "Vanessa, can we talk?" She looked up from her phone, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "About what? Us. The kids. This. Distance between us." She sighed, putting her phone down. "Carlos, there's no distance. I'm just busy with work. So busy you can't make time for your family." Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair. I'm working hard to provide for this family." "We both work hard, Vanessa, but lately, it feels like you're somewhere else." She stood up abruptly. "I'm right here, Carlos. If you think there's distance, maybe you should consider your own actions," she said sharply, then stormed out of the room, leaving me shocked and upset. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to mend whatever was wrong between us. I went downstairs to make Vanessa's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with whipped cream. While setting the table, I heard her phone buzz on the counter. Without thinking, I looked at the screen. My heart sank. There, plain as day, was a message from someone named Gregory. It said, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Same time, same place." My hand shook as I picked up the phone. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened the message thread. What I saw shattered my world. Intimate messages, explicit photos, declarations of love and lust. I felt sick. The sound of footsteps on the stairs snapped me back to reality. I quickly set the phone down, my mind spinning. Vanessa walked in, her eyes widening when she saw the breakfast. "Carlos, what's all this?" she asked. I turned to her, speaking softly. "Who's Gregory?" Her face went pale. "What?" I picked up her phone, my hand shaking. I saw the messages, Vanessa. The photos. Everything. She reached for the phone, panic in her eyes. "You shouldn't have looked through my phone." I couldn't hold back anymore. "And you shouldn't have cheated on me," I shouted, losing my composure. Vanessa stumbled back, tears forming in her eyes. "Carlos, I can explain." I interrupted her. "Explain what?" "How you've been lying to me. To our children." She shook her head frantically. "It's not what you think. Gregory's just a friend. A friend you're sleeping with." I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Vanessa's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "Never meant for what to happen? The affair or getting caught?" She reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched away. "Carlo, please. We can work this out. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This is a betrayal." Vanessa's tears were flowing freely now. I know it is. But you have to understand. I felt so alone. You were always working, always focused on your projects." I cut her off, anger rising in my chest. "Don't you dare try to blame this on me. We both have careers, Vanessa, but I never used that as an excuse to cheat." She collapsed into a chair, her body racked with sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." I stood there, seeing the woman I'd loved for 25 years break down. A part of me wanted to comfort her, to hug her and promise we'd solve things. But another part, the part filled with pain and feeling betrayed, couldn't bear to look at her. "I think you should go," I said softly. She looked up sharply. "What?" "I want you to leave." I can't. I can't look at you right now." "Carlos, please," she begged. "Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged, feeling numb. "I don't know. To Gregory's, maybe." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stood up slowly, her legs shaky. "What about the kids?" "I'll talk to them," I said. My voice hollow. "Just go, please." Vanessa nodded, defeat written all over her face. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving behind the life we'd built together. I sank into a chair, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. The smell of pancakes, once inviting, now made my stomach churn. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing. The sound of footsteps jolted me back to reality. Her eyes widening at the sight of the untouched breakfast and my shell-shocked expression. "Dad, what's going on? Where's Mom?" I looked at my daughter, seeing the confusion and fear in her eyes. How was I supposed to tell her that her mother, the woman she'd looked up to her entire life, had betrayed us all? "Naomi, sweetie," I began, my voice cracking. "Sit down. We need to talk." She sat across from me, her body tense. "You're scaring me." "What's the matter?" I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Your mom. She won't be staying with us for a bit." Naomi looked concerned. "What do you mean? Is she okay?" "She's fine," I reassured her, though it was hard to say. "But she's done some things that have hurt our family." "What things?" Naomi demanded, her voice rising. "Dad, what's going on?" I closed my eyes, steeling myself. Your mother has been seeing someone else, another man. The silence that followed was deafening. When I opened my eyes, I saw Naomi's face contort with a mix of shock, disbelief, and pain. No, she whispered. No, Mom wouldn't do that. You're lying. I reached out to take her hand, but she yanked it away. I wish I was, sweetie. I really do. Naomi stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is bullshit. Where is she? I want to talk to Mom. She's gone. Naomi. I asked her to leave. My daughter stared at me, tears welling in her eyes. How could you do that? How could you just kick her out? I felt my own eyes start to burn. Naomi, please try to understand. But she was already running out of the kitchen, her sobs echoing through the house. I heard her bedroom door slam shut, the sound reverberating through my chest like a physical blow. I buried my face in my hands, overwhelmed by the weight of what had happened. How did we end up like this? How did our perfect life fall apart so fast? The rest of the day passed in a blur. I called Ethan and Lucas, asking them to come home early. Telling them was as hard as telling Naomi. Lucas stormed out, while Ethan sat there silently, shocked. As night came, I found myself sitting on my bed, staring at the empty space where Vanessa used to be. Her smell lingered on the pillow, reminding me painfully of what we'd lost. A gentle knock on the door broke my thoughts. Naomi stood there, her eyes teary and red. "Dad?" she said, her voice small. Can I stay with you tonight?" I nodded, patting the space next to me. She crawled onto the bed, curling up against me like she used to when she was little. "I'm sorry I yelled at you," she mumbled into my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, kissing the top of her head. "It's okay, sweetie, I understand." We sat in silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. "What happens now?" Naomi finally asked. I sighed, wishing I had a better answer for her. "I don't know, honey, but we'll figure it out together, okay?" She nodded, sniffling softly. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." As Naomi drifted off to sleep, I stared out the window at the starlit sky. Our world had been turned upside down, but we were still a family. Different, broken, but still together. Whatever came next, we'd face it as one. It was all we could do. The morning sun peeked through the curtains, rousing me from a fitful sleep. Naomi was still curled up next to me, her face peaceful in slumber. I gently untangled myself, careful not to wake her. Downstairs I found Ethan at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his cereal. "Morning, son," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. He looked up with red eyes. "Hey, Dad, any news from Mom?" I shook my head. "Not yet. How are you feeling?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's really happening, you know?" "I understand," I replied, sitting down across from him. "Where's Lucas?" "Still in bed. He was up late, talking to his girlfriend." I nodded, sipping my coffee. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Ethan spoke. "What are we going to do now, Dad?" I set my cup down, meeting his gaze. "We're going to move forward. It won't be easy, but we'll do it together," he asked, his voice cracking. I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "One day at a time, son. One day at a time." The next few weeks were a blur of emotions and difficult decisions. I knew we couldn't stay in the house, too many memories. I found a small apartment nearby and started the process of moving out. One afternoon, as I was packing up the living room, Naomi cornered me. I set down the box I was holding. "What's up, sweetheart?" "I want to stay with Mom," she blurted out. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Naomi, I don't think that's a good idea right now." "Why not?" she demanded. "She's still my mother." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I know she is, but what she did, it's not just about her and me. It affects all of us. So you're punishing her by taking us away." "No, that's not." It's not fair, Naomi shouted, tears filling her eyes. You can't make all the decisions for us. I moved closer to her, but she moved away. Naomi, please try to understand. No, you understand, she yelled. I hate this. I hate what Mom did. But I hate that you're tearing our family apart too. With that, she stormed out, leaving me standing alone among half-packed boxes. The day we moved out was one of the hardest of my life. As I locked the front door for the last time, I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. At the apartment, tensions were high. Lucas refused to unpack, insisting this was just temporary. Ethan threw himself into setting up his new room, barely speaking to anyone. Naomi oscillated between anger and sadness, locking herself in her room for hours at a time. One night, about a week after we'd moved, I found myself sitting on the tiny balcony, staring at the unfamiliar skyline. The sound of the sliding door opening broke my reverie. Hey, Dad, Lucas said, joining me. Can't sleep. I shook my head. Too much on my mind. You. He shrugged. Same, I guess? Dad, are you and Mom really over? The question, so direct, caught me off guard. I don't know, son. Right now. It's hard to imagine how we could come back from this. Lucas nodded, his eyes distant. I keep hoping I'll wake up and it'll all be a bad dream, you know? I put my arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. Me too, kiddo. Me too. We sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker. Dad, Lucas said softly. Yeah, I'm sorry I've been acting badly lately. I don't know how to handle everything. I squeezed his shoulder. It's okay, Lucas. We're all trying to figure things out. The next morning, I woke up with a strong resolve to begin rebuilding our lives. I phoned my parents, requesting if Ethan and Lucas could stay with them for some time. Of course they can, my mother replied. But Carlos, what about you and Naomi? I sighed. I'm not sure yet. I need to find a more permanent place, somewhere we can all be together. You know you're always welcome here, she offered. Thanks, Mom, but I think we need our own space to heal. After hanging up, I broke the news to the kids. Ethan and Lucas took it better than I expected, but Naomi was furious. So now you're shipping us off, she accused. Naomi, it's just temporary. I tried to explain, until I can find us a proper home. Whatever, she muttered, storming off to her room. The day Ethan and Lucas left for my parents' house was bittersweet. As I watched them drive away, I felt a mixture of relief and loneliness. They'll be okay, a voice said behind me. I turned to see a woman I didn't recognize standing in the hallway. She was about my age, with kind eyes and a warm smile. I'm sorry, she said, extending her hand. I'm Adrien and I live down the hall. I shook her hand. Carlos, nice to meet you. I couldn't help overhearing, she said, looking apologetic. Are you going through a separation? I nodded, surprised by her directness. Yeah, it's complicated. Adrien's smile turned sympathetic. I've been there. It's tough. But it does get better. Something in her tone made me believe her. Thanks, that's good to hear. Listen, she said. I know we've only just met. But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm a good listener. I found myself smiling for the first time in days. I might take you up on that. Over the next few weeks, Adrien became someone I relied on. We'd meet for coffee in the building's little garden, chatting about anything and everything. One evening, as we sat on a bench watching the sunset, she turned to me. Carlos, can I ask you something? Sure, I replied, curious. Have you thought about taking legal action? Against your wife, I mean. I blinked, taken aback. No, not really. Why? Her expression serious. I'm a lawyer, Carlos. Specifically, I handle divorce cases. What your wife did. There could be grounds for more than just a simple divorce. My mind reeled. What do you mean? Emotional distress, breach of trust, depending on her position at work. There could even be professional ramifications. I shook my head, overwhelmed. I don't know, Adrien. I hadn't even thought about divorce, let alone lawsuits. She placed her hand on mine, her touch comforting. I know it's a lot to consider, but you need to protect yourself and your children. At least think about it, okay? I nodded, my thoughts a jumble. As I walked back to my apartment, Adrien's words echoed in my mind. Could I really take legal action against Vanessa, the woman I'd loved for 25 years? When I opened the door, I found Naomi sitting on the couch, her face tear-stained, her voice trembling. I talked to Mom today. I sat next to her, my heart racing. What did she say? Naomi took a shaky breath. She wants to see us, all of us. She says she wants to explain. I felt really angry. Explain? What is there to explain? I asked. Dad, please, Naomi begged. Can't we at least listen to her side? I stood up and walked around the small living room. Naomi, after everything she did. I know what she did, Naomi shouted, standing up too. But she's still our mom. Don't we deserve to know why? I stopped, looking at my daughter. The pain in her eyes mirrored my own. Okay, I said softly. Okay, we'll meet with her. The meeting was set for the following weekend. I spent the days leading up to it in a state of anxiety, rehearsing what I would say, imagining every possible scenario. When the day finally arrived, I picked up Ethan and Lucas from my parents' house. The car ride to the cafe where we'd agreed to meet was silent, tension thick in the air. We arrived first, choosing a table in the corner. When Vanessa walked in, my breath caught in my throat. She looked different. Smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced by hesitation. Hi, she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. Thank you for coming. I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. Naomi broke the silence. Mom, why? Why did you do it? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Oh, sweetie, I made a terrible mistake. I was feeling lonely, neglected. But that's no excuse. What I did was unforgivable. Damn right it was, Lucas muttered. Lucas, I warned. But Vanessa held up her hand. No, he's right. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed all of you, and I'm very sorry, Vanessa said. Ethan, who had been silent until then, asked, Are you still with him, Gregory? Vanessa shook her head firmly. No, absolutely not. I ended it the day your dad found out. I see now what a big mistake it was. I finally found my voice. What did you expect to happen here, Vanessa? Did you think we'd just forgive and forget? She met my gaze, her eyes pleading. No, Carlos, I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you all to know how sorry I am. How much I regret what I did. The conversation continued, filled with tears, accusations, and painful truths. By the end, we were all emotionally exhausted. As we stood to leave, Vanessa reached out, touching my arm. Carlos, can we talk? Just the two of us. I hesitated, then nodded. Wait for me in the car, okay? Once they were gone, Vanessa spoke. Carlos, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance for us? Any at all? I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, and felt nothing. The pain was still there, but the love, it was gone. No, Vanessa, I said quietly. There isn't. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. I'm so sorry, Carlos, for everything. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step towards closure. Back at the apartment, I found myself knocking on Adrien's door. Carlos, she said, surprised. Is everything all right? I paused to take a deep breath. I've been thinking about what you said, about legal action. Her eyes widened. Oh, I want to do it, I said firmly. I want to file for divorce, and I want you to be my lawyer. Adrien nodded, her face serious. Okay, let's discuss the specifics. The following months were a blur of legal meetings and emotional challenges. Adrien was incredibly helpful, patiently guiding me through the complicated divorce procedures with empathy and support. As we worked together, I found myself growing closer to her. She understood my pain in a way no one else could, having gone through a difficult divorce herself. One night, as we were reviewing some paperwork in her apartment, she looked up at me, her eyes soft. "Carlos, I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. I have feelings for you, and I know this is complicated, with me being your lawyer and everything that's going on with your divorce." But I cut her off, leaning in to kiss her. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling. "I have feelings for you too," I said softly. Our relationship progressed slowly, both of us aware of the complexities of our situation. But with each passing day, I felt myself healing, moving forward. The kids' reactions were mixed when I told them about Adrien. Naomi was skeptical, Ethan cautiously supportive, and Lucas, well, Lucas was Lucas. "Dad, are you sure about this?" he asked one day. Isn't it kind of soon?" I sat down next to him on the couch. "I know it might seem that way, buddy, but Adrien, she makes me happy. Happier than I've been in a long time." Lucas nodded slowly. "Okay, just be careful, all right?" I pulled him into a hug. "I will be. Promise." As the divorce proceedings moved forward, things took an unexpected turn. The media got wind of the story, sensationalizing it in the local news. "Prominent architect's marriage crumbles amid scandalous affair," the headline screamed. Vanessa was forced to publicly acknowledge her affair with Gregory, her professional reputation taking a severe hit. I felt a mix of feeling justified and guilty as I saw her life falling apart. Part of me wanted her to feel the pain she had caused me, but another part remembered the woman I had once loved. Adrien sensed my inner struggle and squeezed my hand. "Are you all right?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, it's just overwhelming." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I understand, but you're doing what's best, Carlos, for yourself and your kids." As the legal fights became more intense, I found myself facing Gregory for the first time since finding out about the affair. He looked haggard, the stress of the situation clearly taking its toll. "Mr. Hastings," he said, his voice shaky. I want to apologize." I cut him off. "Save it. Your apology means nothing to me." He nodded, shoulders slumping. "I understand. I just want you to know. I never meant for any of this to happen." I laughed bitterly. Funny how actions have consequences, isn't it? As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure. Gregory would face his own repercussions, both legally and professionally. The final blow came when the judge granted me full custody of Naomi. Vanessa, her voice breaking, tried to protest. "Your Honor, please," she begged. "She's my daughter, too." The judge looked at her sternly. "Mrs. Hastings, given the circumstances and your daughter's age, the court believes it's in Naomi's best interest to remain with her father." As we left the courthouse, Naomi turned to me, her eyes shining. "Dad, can we go home now?" I pulled her close, feeling a surge of love and protectiveness. "Yeah, sweetheart. Let's go home." That night, as I sat on the balcony of our new apartment, a place big enough for all of us, Adrien joined me. "Penny, for your thoughts." She handed me a glass of wine. I smiled and took a sip. "I was thinking about how much things have changed," I said. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over. And now?" She leaned in and kissed me gently. I looked at her, feeling warmth spread through me. "I think it might be just beginning." We sat together, watching the city lights twinkle. A sense of peace washed over me. The path ahead wouldn't be simple, but with Adrien beside me and my kids safe, I felt prepared for whatever lay ahead. The sound of laughter drifted from inside. Naomi and Adrien's daughters were watching a movie together. It was a new kind of family, unexpected and still forming, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. The morning of the final divorce hearing arrived with a sense of finality. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, when Naomi appeared in the doorway. "You ready for this, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft. I turned to face her. "As ready as I'll ever be. How about you?" She shrugged, playing with the hem of her shirt. "I don't know. It's weird, you know? Like this is really it. You and Mom are really over." I walked over to her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "I know it's tough, sweetheart. But remember, just because your mom and I aren't together anymore doesn't mean we're not still a family." Naomi looked up at me, her eyes glistening. "Promise." "I promise," I said, pulling her into a hug. "No matter what happens in that courtroom today, you kids are still the most important thing in my life." The ride to the courthouse was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Adrien met us at the entrance, her presence a comforting anchor. "You okay?" she asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded. "Let's just get this over with." Inside, Vanessa was already sitting with her lawyer. Our eyes briefly met, and I saw sadness and acceptance in hers. The judge came in, and we all stood up. As he started talking, I felt a strange feeling of déjà vu. Hadn't we been here before, fighting over custody? But this time was unlike before. This time was the end. "Mr. and Mrs. Hastings," the judge said, "have you both reviewed and agreed to the terms of the divorce settlement?" "Yes, Your Honor," we both replied. Vanessa and I replied in unison. He nodded. "Very well. By the power vested in me by the state of Connecticut, I hereby declare your marriage dissolved." The bang of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, marking the end of our 25-year marriage. As we filed out, Vanessa approached me. "Carlos, can we talk for a moment?" I glanced at Adrien, who nodded encouragingly. "Sure," I said to Vanessa. We stepped aside, away from the bustling corridor. Vanessa took a deep breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I truly regret what I did." I studied her face, searching for any hint of the woman I once loved. "I appreciate that, Vanessa. But you're right, it doesn't change anything." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "I understand. I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours, and for the kids." I sighed, feeling the weight of our shared history. "Maybe someday, but right now I need to focus on moving forward, on rebuilding our family in a new way." Vanessa glanced over at Adrien, who was talking quietly with Naomi. "She seems good for you," she said softly. "She is," I replied. "Vanessa, I hope you find happiness too." "I really do." With a final nod, we parted ways. As I walked back to Adrien and Naomi, I felt a chapter of my life coming to an end. That night, as we all sat around the dinner table, Adrien, her daughters, Naomi, Ethan, and Lucas, I looked at the faces of my new blended family and felt a surge of hope. "So," I began, clearing my throat, "I have something I want to discuss with all of you." 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me with anticipation. "Adrien and I have been talking, and, well, we'd like to make this arrangement permanent. We want to buy a house together. A place big enough for all of us." There was an immediate and varied reaction. Naomi looked surprised, her eyes widening. Ethan grinned. And Lucas looked skeptical. "Are you guys getting married?" Adrien's younger daughter, Sophia, asked excitedly. Adrien and I exchanged a look. "We haven't talked about that yet," she said carefully. "Right now, we're just focusing on bringing our families together under one roof. If that's okay with all of you?" There was a moment of silence before Ethan spoke up. "I think it's great. I mean, we're all practically living together anyway, right?" Naomi nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess so. It would be nice to have a real home again." All eyes turned to Lucas, who had remained silent. "Lucas," I prompted gently. "What do you think, buddy?" He shrugged, pushing his food around his plate. "Whatever. It's not like we have much choice, do we? Lucas, Adrien said softly. Of course you have a choice. We're a family now, all of us. That means we make big decisions together. Lucas looked up, his eyes meeting Adrien's. Really? So if I said I didn't want to, you guys wouldn't do it? I leaned forward, holding my son's gaze. If you have serious concerns, Lucas, we want to hear them. Your feelings matter to us. He stayed quiet for a moment, then sighed. It feels like we're trying to replace Mom. Like we're pretending the last 18 years didn't happen. The table went quiet. I felt a lump in my throat, understanding my son's pain. Oh, Lucas, Adrien said gently, breaking the silence. We're not trying to replace your mom. No one could ever do that. We're just building something new, adding to your family, not taking anything away. I nodded, reaching out to squeeze Lucas's hand. Your mom will always be a part of our lives, buddy. Always. This isn't about forgetting the past. It's about building a future. Together. Lucas looked around the table, his eyes landing on each face. Slowly, a small smile formed on his lips. Okay, he said softly. I guess I'm in. The tension around the table dissolved, replaced by excited chatter about house hunting and room arrangements. As the weeks passed, we threw ourselves into the search for our new home. It wasn't easy finding a place that could. We found a sprawling old Victorian with enough bedrooms and a big backyard. The day we moved in was chaos, with boxes everywhere and everyone tripping over each other. But as we collapsed on the floor that night, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and takeout containers, I couldn't help but feel a sense of rightness. Hey, Dad, Naomi said, leaning against my shoulder. Yeah, sweetheart, I think I want to start seeing a therapist. I turned to look at her, surprised. Really? What brought this on? She shrugged, picking at the carpet. I have a lot of stuff I need to work through, about Mom, and the divorce, and everything. I pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I think that's a great idea, Naomi. In fact, I was thinking about seeing someone too. Maybe we could have some sessions together? She looked up at me with a slight smile. Yeah, I'd like that. The next few months were busy with changes and getting better. Naomi and I began seeing a therapist, both by ourselves and together. It was hard talking about old hurts and facing painful truths. But little by little, we started to heal. One day, after a very intense session, Naomi and I sat in the car, both feeling emotionally tired. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? She asked. I sighed and looked at her. I don't know, sweetheart. Forgiveness is a complicated thing, but I'm working on it. Not for her sake, but for mine, and for you kids. Naomi nodded, her eyes distant. I think I want to forgive her too, but it's hard. I reached out, squeezing her hand. I know it is, but we'll get there. Together. As the months turned into a year, our new family settled into a rhythm. There were still rough patches, arguments over household chores, adjusting to new rules and expectations, but overall, we were happy. One evening, as Adrien and I sat on the porch swing, watching the kids play a chaotic game of tag in the backyard, she turned to me with a smile. So, Mr. Hastings, she said, a twinkle in her eye. I have a question for you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that, Miss Parker? She took a deep breath, suddenly looking nervous. How would you feel about making this arrangement even more permanent? My heart skipped a beat. Adrien, are you? She pulled a small box from her pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band. Carlos Hastings, will you marry me? For a moment, I was speechless. Then a grin spread across my face. Adrien Parker, I would be honored to marry you. Our kiss was interrupted by a chorus of cheers. We looked up to see all 5 kids standing on the lawn, grinning from ear to ear. It's about time. Ethan called out. Yeah, Lucas added, a genuine smile on his face. What took you guys so long? As we all hugged each other tightly, I felt a sense of wholeness that I hadn't felt in years. This was my family, not the one I had expected, but the one I needed. The wedding was a small, cozy event in our backyard. Standing under the flower-covered arch, I watched Adrien walk towards me and felt overwhelmed with love and gratitude. "We're gathered here today," the officiant started, "to celebrate the marriage of Carlos and Adrien and the blending of their families." As we exchanged vows, I glanced at our small group of guests. My parents sat in the front row, glowing with pride. Naomi, Ethan, and Lucas stood beside me, while Adrien's daughters stood beside her. And there, in the back, sat Vanessa. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small, sad smile. I nodded in acknowledgement, feeling a sense of closure. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss the bride." As our lips met, the backyard erupted in cheers and applause. We turned to face our guests, hand in hand, ready to start our new life together. The months that followed were a whirlwind of joy and challenges. My architecture firm landed a major contract, keeping me busier than ever. Adrien's legal expertise proved invaluable as we navigated the complexities of running a blended household. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Lucas cleared his throat. "So, I have some news," he said, looking nervous. We all turned to him expectantly. "I got accepted into the summer internship program at Dad's firm," he announced, a hint of pride in his voice. The table erupted in congratulations. "That's fantastic, Lucas," I exclaimed, feeling a surge of pride. "But I thought you weren't interested in architecture." He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I wasn't, but after seeing how passionate you were about it, I don't know. I guess it rubbed off on me." As I looked around the table at the faces of my family, old and new, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Later that night, as Adrien and I got ready for bed, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "I ran into Gregory at the courthouse today." I felt a twinge of discomfort at the mention of his name. "Oh, how did that go?" she sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Not good for him, at least. He's lost his job, his reputation, everything." "Really?" I said as I sat beside her, thinking it over. "And how do you feel about that?" Adrien looked at me, her expression gentle. "Honestly, I feel sorry for him. Don't get me wrong, what he did was awful. But seeing someone's life completely collapse, it's not a good feeling." I nodded, understanding her perspective. "And Vanessa? Have you heard anything about her?" "From what I've gathered, she's struggling, both personally and professionally. The affair and the divorce have really taken a toll on her," I said quietly, emotions swirling inside me. You know, part of me wanted them to suffer, to feel the pain they caused us. But now, I just feel sorry for them. Adrien took my hand and gently squeezed it. "That's because you're a good man, Carlos. And I think that means you're starting to forgive." I looked at her, feeling a rush of love for this woman who had helped me rebuild my life. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You know that." She smiled and kissed me softly. "We did it together. That's what partners do." As we settled into bed, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the pain, the betrayal, the anger. It had all led to this moment of peace and happiness. The next morning, I woke up early, slipping out of bed without waking Adrien. I made my way to the kitchen, intending to start breakfast, but found Naomi already there, nursing a cup of coffee. "Morning, Dad," she said, looking up from her phone. "You're up early." I poured myself a cup, joining her at the counter. "Could say the same about you." "Everything okay?" She nodded, then hesitated. "Actually, I talked to Mom yesterday." I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest. "Oh, how did that go?" Naomi sighed, pushing her hair back from her face. "It was okay, I guess. She seems different. Sadder, maybe." She asked about you and Adrien. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," Naomi said, meeting my eyes. That we're happy. That you're happy. I nodded, feeling a mix of feelings. And how do you feel about all of this, sweetheart? She paused for a moment, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. I think. I think I'm starting to forgive her. It's not easy, and I still get mad sometimes. But I don't want to keep that anger forever, you know? I reached out and squeezed her hand. I understand exactly what you mean, and I'm proud of you, Naomi. It takes a lot of strength to forgive. She smiled, a genuine and bright smile that reminded me of when she was little. I learned from the best, Dad. As the rest of the family started to wake up, filling the house with the sounds of morning routines and playful arguments, I felt a deep sense of peace settling over me. We had been through so much, faced challenges I never expected, but we had emerged stronger and more united than ever. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I cherished. With Adrien by my side, our children around us, and the promise of new adventures ahead, I knew that whatever obstacles came our way, we would face them together. Looking at my blended, beautifully imperfect family, I realized that sometimes the most painful endings can lead to the most wonderful beginnings. And for that, I was endlessly thankful. Second story. Is this considered cheating, or am I overreacting? Me, 21, and my now ex-boyfriend, 23, had an on and off relationship since 2019. I often caught him texting other women and trying to meet them at hotels and such. Despite this, I kept going back to him because I think I have an attachment issue. We started dating when I was 17, and he was 19, so we grew up together in a way. We broke up in November 2023 because I caught him cheating again. Then in February, I thought he had changed, so I moved back in with him and his family. Everything seemed okay until today when I had an urge to check his phone. I found out he had a hidden Twitter account, which was suspicious, so I checked it. It turns out he has been posting photos and videos of himself, texting other women in the industry, swapping photos with them, and making comments. He's been doing this behind my back since 2022. I got really upset because I feel like this is the last straw. I consider it cheating, but maybe I'm overreacting. He says it's a disgusting addiction he has. But he was doing these things while I was right next to him in bed asleep in one of the videos. I'm literally asleep next to him. I think I've reached the point of loving him until I hate him. I feel gross and used, and I'm still in shock. He always wanted me to be the perfect girl, no selfies online, no texting friends male or female, no revealing clothes, so I don't understand how he could do this. Was he even in love with me like he said he was? Was he even attracted to me? How do I move on from this? Am I reacting unfairly? I don't know.